Hey everyone, welcome to another live stream. We are going to be doing, this is our third Jira for software for complete beginners. And so I'm really happy to have you here. I am in a little bit of a different environment today, and so I'm not going to have as much easy access to the chat, but I'm going to be very intentional here. Bob, please do feel free if you do have the ability, maybe come off a mute every once in a while during a breaking point and maybe help me ask some of the questions so I can answer them. But I'm going to try my best here to address questions. But we're just going to jump into it. If you are new here, my name's Alex. I am going to be following my traditional format, which is we're going to be couple little bullet points in PowerPoint, but most of the time we're going to be inside of Jira. And so again, this is a complete beginners. So if you are new to Jira, you're gonna love this. This is the course that you've been looking for because I'm gonna cover the bare minimum basics of how Jira software works. And if you're a little bit more advanced, hopefully this is a good refresher for you. And yeah, let's just jump into it. First off, some good morning to Teresa. Good morning to Pridarshi. Thank you so much for tuning in, for joining. Do feel free to utilize that chat though. I do have a little bit of help here, so if you have questions, we are going to be monitoring the chat and answering back. So with that said, I'm going to just go straight into presenting my screen. We're going to jump into the presentation, and then we'll jump into Jira. So, all right. So as I mentioned, Jira software for beginners. Oops, this is not February, this is March. This is what happens when I updated everything else except the one slide. March 2024. Hopefully this is your first time here. If it isn't, welcome back. But if it's the first time, I'm so happy to have you here. Really excited to have the honor and pleasure of teaching you Jira software. These are some of the things we're going to be covering today. Again, very basic. We'll talk about navigation, projects, creating and editing issues. We'll talk about Jira boards and next steps. But before we get too far into it, you're probably wondering, who's this guy? So in case you haven't stumbled upon one of my YouTube channels, my name's Alex. I'm normally based out of Southern California, but today I'm on travel and I'm on the East Coast. I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida. And so I'm not in my typical elements. I usually have my YouTube background and everything with my lights and stuff. So yeah, tuning in from a slightly different place. But I do have a bachelor's in computer engineering, a master's in systems engineering. I've been a Jira administrator for seven and a half years now. And Bob, you're gonna love this. I get to announce for the first time in one of these streams that I'm officially an ACP. I'm an Atlassian certified professional. I officially have the ACP. I forget which one I got. The 520, I think, is the one I have for admin cloud. And so I'm really excited that I now have that certification under my belt. As I mentioned, 7.5 years using Jira. I use Jira 12 hours a day, a lot. And so I know a thing or two about this tool. And finally, YouTube. In case you haven't ever stumbled upon a question on the internet, if you ever Google something or YouTube some Jira question, hopefully my face pops up. But I do have a YouTube channel, Tech Tutorials. There's that QR code there. If you want to scan that, it'll take you to all the different resources that I have available. But most importantly, if you can take a second right now, you may have noticed that this channel is not Tech. I'm actually on my other channel, something that the Jira guy, King Bob, who's in the background, and myself, we're trying to grow. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers. We're about a little under 150 subscribers away. So if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the Jira Life, which is a really cool podcast that we have together, that basically focuses on Atlassian communities, right? And so if you're looking for a home, if you're looking for a place to collaborate, to get to know individuals that share the same passion of Jira and Confluence and all the Atlassian tools, then the Jira Life is like the perfect podcast and community for you. So take a second here to smash that subscribe button. Help us get to those 1,000 subscribers. We're so close. We can taste the victory, but we can't do it without your help. So again, if you haven't smashed that subscribe button, now would be a great time to just help us out and smash the subscribe button. And scan the QR code so you can see everything else. We'll talk about it at the end. All right, so let's jump into and talk about Jira navigation. Jira navigation is really important. You need to know how to move around, how things work. And so we're gonna spend 10, 15 minutes here just talking about the navigation, and we're gonna kind of combine navigation with Jira projects. we'll talk a little bit about just how to move around Jira, because Jira is a pretty complex tool. It's not the easiest. It's a great tool, but it's not the easiest to navigate when you're brand new. So I'm going to be here as your coach, as your guide, to help you understand what it is we're looking at. What is this Jira thing? How do we use it? How do we move around? And how do we not get in trouble? Okay. And so that's kind of my objective here. So I'm going to start off with the top. This is Atlassian, or specifically Jira's navigation. Now, the reason I say Atlassian is because if you use any of the Atlassian tools, and there's a lot of them, most of them are going to have a very familiar look and feel with the navigation. Now, depending on which product you're in, it's going to obviously change, and we're going to be focusing on Jira's. But just know that Confluence and a couple of the other tools, they have a very similar look and feel. Now, what you're seeing in front of you is Jira Software. There are 5 flavors of Jira. There's Jira Software, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. There's Jira Work Management, Jira Service Management, Jira Product Discovery, and Jira Align. Now, the first 4 are attainable, and you can go and buy. They're all free for you to use. Jira Align, you need a few $1 million to use, and so not really something that you can just pick up and use, which breaks my heart a little bit. But Jira Software and all the other Jiras, they're going to basically be in this same interface right here. They all kind of just get blobbed together. So on the left-hand side, the first thing I want to start off with is this little grid. This little grid allows you to change. And as I mentioned, Atlassian has a lot of products. And this little grid is what's going to allow you to switch. So depending on which product you have, as you can see here, I have all the products. Special thanks again to King Bob for helping me out here. But when the more products that you have from Atlassian, they're all going to show up here. And this little grid here is just a great way for you to navigate, to change between Confluence and Jira, or go to Bitbucket or to Compass or Product Discovery, right? I love this grid again, because unlike some other tools that are all they do everything, right? They're just these mega tools, like Azure DevOps is the one that comes to mind. Everything's all in that unified tool, but Atlassian, they took a different approach. Rather than make this tool super big, super clunky, you broke it up. And so you have different functionalities, capabilities are in their respective tools. And so naturally, you got to go to different places. So I like that they have this little grid here that lets you go there. Now, if you have a sandbox, if you're on Jira Premium, or if you're on enterprise version of Jira, you may have access to a sandbox. And so at this point, we now not only have 1 Jira, but we have 2 Jiras. So this same grid here, if you look really closely, there's a little black arrow. You can hit that drop down, and this will let you change between your different Jiras. And so obviously I have a lot of Jiras, but if you look here, we have like sandboxes. And so your sandboxes will also make an appearance here, and this is how you get to those sandboxes. So that's that little grid. That grid, again, is going to save you your butt, especially if you work in an organization with a lot of different Jiras and a lot of different Atlassian products. They're all going to be there. So I'm going to do just a very quick, I'm going to switch back over to StreamYard and just make sure, okay, make sure everybody can hear me, make sure I'm not just talking to an empty room. Give me a thumbs up here if you guys can all hear me. I'm assuming you can. And just real quickly, yes, this is being recorded, it's live stream, so you will be able to rewatch this at a different time. There's nothing on the PowerPoint, Gwen. So again, it's very basic. There's just nothing in here. So everything's in Jira. So you kind of have to pay attention. Jira is best learned not via PowerPoint, but via the tool itself. So that's where the majority of the course is going to be. I just put a couple of keywords in the PowerPoint to just help guide me and make sure I stay on topic. All right. Moving to the right on this navigation, we have this little button. This is a configurable button. Your company might put your logo on there. You might do whatever you want, but this is basically going to take you back to your homepage, whatever that homepage may be, and it'll just bring you back home. Now, what I want you to know, if you're new to Jira, finding your work is usually a very scary thing, because like I mentioned, right, you can be really overwhelmed easily when you're using Jira for the first time, and being able to find out all the things that are assigned to you, which board it's in, which project it's in, and again, we'll get into what projects and boards are in a second. But at the end of the day, especially when you're new, all you care about is what work am I supposed to be working on, right? And so Atlassian has solved that problem for us right here, front and center in this Your Work section. And so when I click on it, there's 2 different things. There's this little pop-up, this little modal that pops up that allows you to kind of look at some really cool things. But you also have this go to your work page, which is this main page that kind of just takes up your whole screen. I'm going to be focusing on the little pop-up first, and then we'll go to the page. But this little pop-up, in my opinion, is going to give you the most important thing that you need, and that is what's assigned to you. This is again, the most important thing that I think as a user of Jira, you need to know. What is my responsible for? What am I being paid for? And what are the consequences if I don't finish things, right? And so they're going to find out here. And so this assigned to me is great to see what's in progress, what's to do, whatever status your things are. As long as the assignee equals your name, it will show up right here. Now, Jira is also kind of nosy. It keeps track on you. And so if you're interacting, so if you edit, let's just say that you add a comment, or maybe you provided the due date for something, or you transition the status, right? Maybe it's not assigned to you, but you're interacting with things inside of Jira. Well, Jira's going to remember, and it's going to tell you, hey, these are the things that you've been working on. And you can scroll through this list and you can see things that you've worked on. So you've actually edited or interacted in some method. Or maybe you just viewed, maybe you're just window shopping. And so that is all going to be tracked in this viewed section down here. And so again, use this worked on for things that you actually edited. You don't necessarily need to be the person assigned, but maybe you added a comment, maybe you added an attachment, or maybe you're just being nosy. You yourself are being nosy, and you're just looking around. And so Jira's going to tell you, hey, here's some of the most recent items that you've touched. We'll talk about boards in a second, but your boards are also here. So if you really quickly want to get into a board, this is where you're going to be able to find those. If you're using Jira Service Management, not in scope for this training, but if you're using Jira Service Management, you'll see your queues here. And if you're using something like Ops Genie, and not in scope here, we'll have them over here as well. So anyways, that's your work. And now I'm just going to kind of focus on your page, on your work page. And this is basically the same thing. The only major difference that you get, oh, my lights turned off. The only major difference that you get from this holistic view is that if you're using Compass, you'll see your on-call schedule over here. But the other new thing that you'll see down here at the bottom is that you have this starred section. So throughout the UI in Jira, you're actually allowed to bookmark and put a little star on certain items, and they'll show up here. Okay, so that's it on your work. Again, the most critical thing, if you walk away from today knowing anything, is that your work will save your butt. This is where you go to make sure you know where your things are responsible for. Now, everything else, I'm going to kind of speed through it because it's not as important. I think you having a solid understanding of how to change products, how to get to Jira or Confluence, critical. How to find the stuff that's assigned to you, super, super critical. Everything else is just going to be nice to know. So let me kind of walk down the list here, and then we'll jump into an actual Jira project. So this project list here is going to be all the projects that you have access to. If you don't have access to it, guess what? It is not going to show up here. So if you have access to a specific project, it'll be in your project list. You can bookmark them, as we talked about earlier. So you can put a little star on it. It'll be at the top. Or Jira's just going to show you and remind you of the last 5 projects you've been in. If you want to see all of them, because maybe you have access to a lot of projects, you can click on this View All Projects here, and then you'll see the list of all the projects that you have access to. Again, your list is going to vary based on your access, based on the permissions. And so that's that. Filters. Filters are an interesting thing, but before we talk about filters, let's talk about the search. So we got to go over here to the right. You'll notice that there's this search button right here. Basically, inside of Jira, you can search for anything. Keywords, due dates, when it's assigned to somebody. If it's in a Jira issue, you can look for it almost like 99% of the time. And I can type in here, I can put the explicit key, right? So I can type in ESD-4 and it'll find that specific key. I can type in trouble and it'll go see if there's any issues that have the word trouble. They didn't. But if I put in the word story, it's going to go find every issue that has the word story in it, right? And so it's very specific, right? If I put like a number, like number 3, it's going to go find anything that has the number 3 in it, right? So this search is powerful, but you don't want to always search for something, right? You don't want to consistently search and then come back 20 minutes later and search for the same thing over, and then come back tomorrow and search for it again, right? That would be really, really annoying. And so what you're allowed to do is if I click on this View All Issues at the bottom, didn't do it. if I click on this view all issues at the bottom, it takes you to this searching power UI. And in here, I'm going to switch to basic just to make it easy. You're allowed to essentially pick the project you want to search for, pick the type of issue. Maybe we just want to find the bugs and that are assigned to unassigned, right? Maybe we just want to find out how many bugs in this particular project is not assigned to anyone. And that's a problem because we want bugs. Bugs are bad, right? We want them to be assigned to people so that they're being fixed. And so this is a search, right? This is going to bring back every bug that doesn't have any assignees, right? Maybe we can just generalize it, just bring me every bug out there that doesn't have an assignee. And this is going to bring you, regardless of the project, any bug. Again, you still have to have access to the projects in order for these issues to return. But with respect to what you have access to, bring it back to me, which is this is a really important search. But I don't want to search for it every time, right? You saw that I'm dropping the drop downs, and again, you don't want to do this 100 times every day. So there's a save as button up here that allows you to find like unassigned bugs. And when you hit submit, that'll save it as a filter. And so now the filters over here, you'll have your unassigned bugs. And so now from this filter, I can share it with people. You can click on these details and share it. By default, it's always private and just for you, but you do have the ability to edit your permissions and share it with other individuals. But at the end of the day, it just saves you time because you don't have to actually do the search over and over and over. So that's what that's for. Now, if you are looking, because this is cool, right? Like, okay, I see data. There's two ways to see it. I can see it in this like view called detail view, or I can change it in a list view, which looks a little bit more like Excel. But sometimes we want to see pictures. And so that's what dashboards are for. Dashboards are going to allow us to visualize these items, right? And so again, this is a totally different thing now, but this basically allows us to see more data, right? A little bit less Excel and more data driven. And there's different plugins and stuff that you can add to Jira to help you visualize your data. Teams I would ignore for now. Teams is in a transitionary state. In my opinion, it's in a very unstable state. And Atlassian is working on it, but it's not working on it fast enough for it to be useful. But very, very soon, I'm hoping that this Teams section is useful. The plans is only available if you are on premium. And the plans, again, is more of a Jira 400 level course. So we won't jump into it too much, but trust me when I tell you, if you're on Jira Premium or Enterprise and you work in a big company, you want to 100% use these plans. And let me know in the chat here if this is something you're interested in. With that last thing, we are trying to find new topics as we are halfway through our endeavor of these free 1 hour for beginner trainings. We're looking for what else do you want to know? So take a second here in the chat. Just let us know what's interesting to you. What items would you like to know more about search? Would you like to know more about metrics and reporting and dashboards? Would you like to know more about these, what I call the JARs, Jira Advanced Roadmaps? Let me know in the chat here so that I can follow up with the last one and we can figure out more free trainings for you all. Okay, then I'm going to click on more. Assets is a Jira Service Management thing. You don't have to worry about that. Although, unfortunately, today, Atlassian being the upseller, right? And we're in the business of making money, although I don't work for Atlassian. But because they're in the business of making money, they are now showing you. It used to be that these items, these assets, these plans, they wouldn't pop up if you were on a standard or free version of Jira. But today, everything is displayed. And all that happens is you're greeted with the message that says, for some money, you can upgrade. So that's why I'm bringing them up now because they are now visible. And so these are things that you will run into. Just know that it's not something you need to use. So that's the assets. And then the apps are going to be plugins. So any plugins that your company may have purchased, you'll be able to get to some of them. Depending on the plugin, there's like 3 or 4 different places they can hide. But some of your plugins will be here. They're called apps, and this is where you get to them. So that's kind of the navigation bar with one key exception. We have something called the create button. Now, I don't want to talk about the create button just yet, because for that, I need to jump into taking a step back and describing to you what a Jira project is. And so I'm going to jump into projects, but before we do, I'm going to take just a quick second here, go jump back into the chat. Again, you're going to see this little infinite mirror effect, but let me just jump back into the chat, see if there's any critical questions that I may have missed or that are out there, see if I can answer something, and then we'll jump back in. All right, so going over to start here, Bob, anything that stood out to you?
Basically, we're going to keep those for later as future topics. So it looks like JQL or JQuil or Jira Query Language.
Jaquil.
and then metrics, analytics, and notifications. So
Cool. So I will definitely let Alastair know. We'll talk a little bit more. Okay, great. Yeah. So Ellen, thank you so much. Great, great feedback here. And it looks like Jolly's like, yeah, let's more trainings, right? Everybody loves more trainings. In case you haven't already, I don't want to turn this into the commercial for my YouTube channel, but I have almost 600 videos on my YouTube channel, on my main YouTube channel. So make sure you stick around to the end so you can get that QR code again. I will show it one more time. And my main Apex channel, again, 600 videos. There's like videos for everything. And I have hour-long videos for a lot of stuff and small videos for a bunch more things. So make sure you go subscribe to that channel as well so you can see all the cool stuff. Okay, so now we're just going to jump into projects. Okay, so Jira projects is the fundamental. This is the baseline. This is how Jira fundamentally works. And what I like to do is I like to explain projects in a very illustrative manner. So I want you to think of a Jira project like a house, okay? And so every single one of these line items here is a Jira project, and it's a house, okay? And inside these houses, and I'm just gonna click on one of them here, inside these houses, you'll notice that there's this word board. And think of a board like a bedroom inside of that house. And so out of the box, when you first hit the create project button, you will get one house with one room inside of that house. And it's like a one-to-one. Depending on the project type, though, you do have the ability to add more rooms. Gets more complex, a lot harder. And this is where you want to reach out to someone like Release Team to help guide you and coach you through this journey. But just know that the bare minimum, when you first create a project for the first time, it's going to be one house with one room inside. Now, in that room, right? So now we're getting to the semantics of Jira and specifically projects. In that room and in that house, you don't really want an empty house unless you're like Steve Jobs, right? Remember, there's a rumor, I guess not a rumor, but it's a fact that Steve Jobs was a minimalist and had no furniture in his house, right? But most of us, we like to be comfortable. I don't know about you. I don't like sleeping on the floor a whole lot. And I need my very special pillow. Right now that I'm sleeping in a hotel, boy, do I miss my pillow so much. So these are all this furniture, right? These items, these material pieces that we put in these dedicated rooms in Jira, we call those issues. And there's different types of issues, just like a house. You wouldn't put your sink inside your bedroom. You wouldn't put your mattress inside your bathroom, right? This doesn't make sense. There's a place for everything. And so this create button here allows us to pick the house. We have a list of all the different houses that are available to us, but it allows us to pick a house, and then it allows us to pick the different furniture type. Now, this is where we start blurring the lines between Jira, fundamentals of Jira, and Agile and the fundamentals of Agile. Jira is an Agile-based project management tool. Now, I like to say that some people hate when I say that, but this is the best way that I can describe it because it truly is based on the Agile fundamentals, right? So you are going to see the issue types, these stories, these bugs, these epics. These are very much coming from the world of Agile. So if you've never taken an Agile training, Jira is going to not make a whole lot of sense because Jira, again, it's fundamental on the roots on Agile. So a lot of what we're going to do, these backlogs, these boards, these sprints that we're going to talk about in a second, they are all rooted on those concepts of Agile. So you want to definitely make sure you, again, go subscribe to my channel, my main channel, so you can watch those Agile 101 type of trainings. Or again, let me know in the chat if Agile 101 is something you guys are interested in. It's typically not an Atlassian thing, but definitely something I can help facilitate. But anyway, so we have different issue types, and there's tasks, stories, bugs, epics. It just depends on the template that you pick. And essentially, when you're creating issues, it's just a thing. It's just something that somebody needs to work on. And you got to pick what type of thing it is. In Jira, this thing is called an issue. And as I mentioned, there's different types of issues. So stories are good. Stories are usually user stories if you're coming in from the Agile world. Bugs are typically bad because it means something doesn't work, right? But you pick what kind of issue, you and your team want to tackle or work on. Now, traditionally, you're going to have like a project manager and a scrum master and a product manager or a product owner. And there's going to be a lot of other people in play that kind of help figure out what work gets captured and put into Jira. But from an end user perspective, right, if you're just brand new to Jira and you need to create something, the task is the most common one. And so again, just to reiterate how we get here, we hit this create button. We need to have a house. We need to know where we're going to put this in. So you pick your project, and then you pick your issue type. Again, task is usually a pretty common one. And then you fill out the information. So anything that has a little red asterisk, the little star, that is a required field, so you must. I cannot hit create. If I hit the create button, I'm clicking, it will not create it. You have to fill out the required fields. Now, your Jira administrator can set these up. They can set up what fields show up. They can set up which fields are required. Make sure you tune back in a couple of weeks. I have a Jira admin for complete beginners. So if you're interested in the Jira administration, I have a 1-hour course just like this, but for Jira admin. So make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on that in a couple of weeks, right? But we have topics, completely different subject on Jira admins. And so we have the summary, right? So you want to give this, like, this is my super awesome task, exclamation mark. And then you can assign it to somebody. Maybe it is for you, so you can assign it to yourself. You can give it a priority, right? Maybe this is super critical. Oops, super critical. Or maybe this is just a medium priority, or maybe it's just like, you know what? It's informational. Whenever I get to it, I'll get to it, right? But most of the time we're working on critical or high items, so I just give it a high. And then you can fill out the rest, right? These don't have any values because we'll talk about that in a minute, why there's no values, but these are more fields that are in Jira. We can add labels, which basically is a sticker. So labels are just stickers that you put in Jira. I don't recommend labels. I'm not a big fan of labels because labels, these two are two different labels, graphic and graphics. And your team could accidentally pick the wrong one. And so when you do your searches and you're looking for graphics, plural, you're going to miss anything that's tagged with the singular, with just regular graphics. So I try to stay away from labels mainly because anybody can create them, right? Because then this is another label, right? And so you have the ability to make a lot of different labels, and it's just not healthy for anyone. Oops, and I accidentally closed my thing that I was making there. So I guess it's too late to go back to it, but let me just continue down the list here, right? You can add attachments, so you can put in work, right? So if you have a file that you want to upload, PDF, whatever it is, you can link issues together. So maybe you're saying that this bug is to connect to this task. So you have the ability to connect those things together. And again, the assignee depends on what you pick, right? So it depends on the project. So I should make that. Let me back up for 1 second. Every project and every issue type has the ability, and it doesn't mean that this is always true, but it has the ability to be configured differently. So as you can see here, here's the list for this particular project and the order. Notice that assignee is way at the bottom. If I change to a different project, this design one, notice that now I have like a due date and I have a description. The assignee is in the middle, right? I have a start date now in a category, right? So all of these change. Now, if I were to pick maybe this one and I pick a bug, these are going to have different fields too, right? So again, every single one of these is configurable and can be unique, but you need to be talking to your admin because they're the only ones that are going to be able to make these changes for you. But anyways, once you fill it out, you hit the create button and it's going to end up in your backlog. And so I'm trying to find, I think I just went to the wrong place. Let me see if I can find that one bug that I made earlier. I think it was in here, or that task. I am not finding it. So rather than me stumbling upon this, I'm just going to create a new one. My super awesome task. I'm going to make sure it's a task. Now, what you're noticing is that I just created its task when I hit enter, but I didn't have that pop up. So there's different ways to create tasks and stories and epics. The create button I like because it's always there. You can always guarantee that that button is going to be right there. But I like the backlog view because in the heat of the moment, right, when you're having these discussions, you're in a conference room like I am right now, and you got 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 different people talking all at the same time, and you just got to make stuff. You can just type them in here, enter, 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 right? And you're just making them really quickly. And so I like this view because, again, it's just in the heat of the moment. You don't want to lose that detail. You just want to create that task so it's in Jira. This is the best view, for my opinion. The create button kind of needs some thought, right? You're coming in here, you're a little bit more relaxed. you're not coming in here in a hurry because it will take a while. But anyways, now that we have created some work, I want to kind of show you this is now the Jira project, right? But not only am I in the Jira project, but I'm inside of a board. I'm inside of a board within a project. And again, those go hand to hand. And a lot of people do interchange project and board quite a bit. Uh, I don't like it because they are two different things. But for the novice, for the beginner, for especially when you just have a bare bones Jira project, it is okay for you to interchange board and project. Just know that they are fundamentally two different things, right? The board is going to be a room, and the project is that entire house, right? And again, it's only important when you have multiple rooms or multiple boards in that house. But if you're using bare bones, totally fine to interchange it. But anyway, so now that we're in here, let me kind of walk you through. So now let's talk about the project a little bit more in detail, right? So what do we got going on here? So our board, first of all, we can change boards. So if this particular project has multiple boards, which again is a little bit more of an advanced thing, but most of the time it doesn't. So as you can see, there's only one board here. You do see other boards in this list, but notice that they belong to other projects. So we don't care about that. Don't ever touch these because these belong somewhere else. They're in a different house, not in your house. So you don't want to worry about these. You just want to worry about the boards in this particular house, which is this one right here. So now that we're in there, we have a timeline. So the timeline is cool. Again, if you're not too familiar with the topics of Agile, you might be a little bit of a disadvantage. So highly recommend you go check out some Agile trainings. But this timeline view is a very cool view. It gives it a little bit more of a waterfall feeling, in my opinion, a lot less agile, but it allows us to start and think big. It allows us to roadmap. This used to be called a roadmap, and the last one changed it to timeline. But it allows us to think big picture. It allows us to put milestones. Atlassian calls us releases. And you see that right here. It allows us to visualize our sprints, which we'll talk about in a second. But most importantly, it allows us to create epics. So I can create my super awesome epic here. And when I hit enter, it's automatically created. And now from this epic, I can give it some dates. So let me close this window out. I can give it some dates here. So I can actually drag and drop a couple of dates here. And now I've given this epic a start date and an end date. Good. This is really good. And I can now start spawning or decomposing my epics into stories or tasks, right? And so I can say my super awesome story one, my super awesome, I should pick a smaller word here, story two. And as you can see, I can decompose this. And if I want to create a bug, I can create a bug, I can create defects, whatever is supported in your project, you can create them right here. And it's really easy. And the most important part is that parent-child relationship is created for you. Because if I were to come over here and I were to create a task and I need to associate it to an epic, which is a good practice, I now need to remember the name of my epic and link it. So the extra couple steps you got to do. But if you're doing it in the timeline view, that linking happens for you automatically. So this is a really cool feature that I like. And what's also cool is that when you plan these stories into a sprint, your sprints are going to show up here. So now you can see the big picture of your epic and you can see those stories and when they're going to be due. And now you can communicate expectations to your stakeholders and you can start kind of figuring out a plan or a roadmap. Again, timeline is what Atlassian calls it. But this is essentially all it is. And you can see it in quarters, you can see it in weeks, you can just see today, or you can see it in months. So you can change your view however you want there. As you can see here, when I zoom out to quarters, you can see that I already have a sprint in here, which we'll talk about in like 2 minutes. But anyways, this is the timeline view. Again, I like it because it allows me to think big, break things up smaller. But it also lets me, it's the one place in Jira that lets me see dates. It lets me see a start and an end date very clearly. So this timeline, super, super invaluable for you to learn how to use. Up next, we have backlog.
Alex,
oh, go ahead.
So before you jump onto the backlog, question about timelines. There, and I'm just show the question. Does Jira offer a native feature to automatically move dependent tasks when one task is moved on the timeline?
You know what? That would be my favorite feature for Atlassian to add. Today, it doesn't, as far as I know, but you do have the ability to link these stories together, and you can see we get, or sorry, epics. We have the ability to link these epics together, and as you can see, we get this line here. And if something gets moved, right, if something starts getting delayed, like this one got delayed 15 days, you can see the plus 15 there on the right side. And if I let go, you'll notice that my line is now red. So it won't auto push. It will not push this guy out 15 days, but it will give you a warning and it will give you a red line. It just doesn't auto push. This is not like Microsoft Project. Although I wish, trust me when I tell you, if Atlassian you can add something cool to Jira, it would be figure out how to push out dependencies because this would just be the coolest feature I think in Jira. But no, unfortunately, it doesn't push out. But again, it does give you a couple of warnings, a couple of visual cues, if you will, that tell you, hey, something's not quite right. Something is not right. What else, Bob?
That's it. Carry on.
Okay, cool. All right. So now that we have these epics, and again, I have some stories, right? I can expand these, and I have some stories and tasks underneath. We get into the backlog. Now, again, you gotta know a little bit of Agile for this to make sense because you don't work off of epics. In Agile, an epic is just a really big story. And you got to break those big epics into stories, right? And so you're always working off the story. And as a result, Jira will mimic that behavior. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the sprint. Everybody close your eyes for 2 seconds. I just need to complete the sprint real quick. Okay. And so what we have here, I'm going to scroll down. What we have here is our backlog. So our backlog is literally all the work that is not finished. So I'm not going to see anything done. Backlog does not show you anything that's completed. I'll show you where you can find those in a second. But your backlog shows you forward looking. It shows you everything that you and your team are responsible for. And it's just a list of everything that you need to finish. Okay. And this backlog is rankable. So that means that this story number 4, if it's more important, I can move it up. And now it's in that order. And you're just going to remember that order. It's called ranking. And so I can rank my backlogs, move things around. I can also right click, right? So if you don't want to get carpal tunnel scrolling, you can just click on that move to and move to the top of the backlog. And you can move the order in which these items are presented. And this is really powerful, right? Because what happens or what you're supposed to do, right? Again, if you've ever taken an Agile training before, you're refining your backlog. You are making the order, you're making sure you have your definition of ready, right? You're making sure you have acceptance criteria. You're making sure that things, these stories or tasks, they're ready. They're ready for your team to engage because you don't want your team to be assigned a story only to go figure out requirements because that's just going to delay the whole process. So this backlog allows you to take items at the bottom. They still need a lot of love and attention. They're not ready for prime time. Versus items at the top of your backlog are supposed to be, thumbs up, more ready for prime time. And when you're ready, right, when you do your sprint planning, again, very agile based, when you do your sprint planning, you can create a sprint here. I already have one. It's called the JAJD Sprint 2. Never mind the dates. Again, this is from February. But now what happens is you can just simply drag and drop those stories into your sprint. Now, again, you don't want to get carpal tunnel. You can just right click, move to, and move it into the sprint. And so what you're supposed to do here in Jira is you basically move, you pull to capacity, right? You pull to how much work can your team take on in a given sprint. And when you're in here, right, you're going to visualize things like the ticket number. You're going to see things like the title or the summary. You're going to see the epics that they're associated to. You're going to see the statuses. And we have this concept called the story point. So each of these items, and again, this is an agile thing, each of these items should be estimated. Your team should figure out a level of effort on how much time it's going to, not time, but how much effort, time and complexity, or if you're a pure agilist, complexity only, how much effort is your team going to have to put into this, right? And most teams use Fibonacci, so it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 1, 2, 3, 5, 13, 21. And so I'm just going to put a couple of random numbers. These would be important, though. This is something you and your team want to actually sit down. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you have a Scrum Master on your team, and they're helping you out with all of this. But when you put these numbers, you'll notice that my sprint now tells me the total number of points that are in my sprint. It tells me the total numbers that are in to do. And you'll see how this is important in a few minutes when we actually start our sprint. But once you have this, then a lot of cool things happen. Now, if you want to take it one step further, this is definitely not an agile best practice, but if you wanted to take one step further, you have the ability to assign these items out to people. So I'm just going to randomly assign these to different people. And when you do that, and the only reason I'm showing it to you is because what's cool is that a lot of teams are very interested in capacity planning within Jira. And so by assigning the work, you'll notice that we get these little bubbles and these three little dots here. And when I click on that, this gives me a breakdown of every user, how many stories are assigned to them, and how many total points. And every person has that magic number of their capacity. And so this is kind of how you measure your capacity for each team member and ultimately for the entire sprint because you get the total number here. So you can gauge in true Goldilocks fashion, did I undertask my team? Am I overtasking my team or am I just right? And so that's how you get that metadata here. It only happens though if you assign it, which again is an anti-agile practice, but who am I to tell you how to agile? Anyways, so once you're ready, right? Once you have all this kind of set up, you hit the start sprint button. And this step is very critical because if I go over to my backlog, to my board, which is called active sprint, you'll notice that it's empty. And the reason that is because you actually have to physically hit this button right here. So when you hit this start sprint button, you'll put the dates. So we'll put some good dates here, right? So I'm going to go into the future instead of being in the past. So I'm going to do a 2-week sprint, hit start, and now those issues show up on my board. And so now you, as a user of Jira, the name of the game is to get the things that are assigned to you and move them to the right. And so you simply just want to move them over to the right. Now, sometimes they have to go in order, sometimes they don't. I'll come back in for my Jira admin training if you're interested in that. But all of this is configurable. What these columns are called, how they are allowed to move. As you can see here, I can't move it to done. I don't know why. I'm always demoing something in these projects. So something's wrong with my workflow where it won't actually let me move it to done. Here we go. I just had to skip I have a column that's missing in my board. And so as you can see now, I have something in done. And you'll notice that when you move something to done, it gets crossed out. This is really good. You also have something called, let me see if it's on here. It's not showing up. So definitely something wrong with my workflow. But usually what happens is not only does it cross it out, but it also resolves it. And so there's a resolution down here. It'll tell you when it got resolved, the time, and date, it timestamps it. So you know when it got resolved, and up here, it'll put the resolution type. So it says it's done, or it's canceled, or duplicate, or whatever you want. But it'll basically cross it out. And once these items make it to the far right, so I'm just going to move this to in review, move it to done, and then I'm going to move this guy over to in progress. So when you do this, right, when you move these things from the left to the right, you then run out of time, right? Your sprints have a dedicated start time and a stop time, right? And you can see them in the timeline, right? So if I go back to my timeline and I go back to weeks view, you'll notice that these are the dates, the 2 weeks that I set for that sprint. And so they have a predetermined end date. And so unfortunately, they won't auto close. You still need to come in and physically hit this button. But when you hit that complete sprint button, Jira's going to say, hey, hold up. You didn't finish everything, right? And when you didn't finish everything, it says you have 1 open issue left and you have 2 completed. Now, you only, if you're writing any notes down, you only get credit. There's 2 completed issues, only are credit to you and your team if and only if they make it to the farthest most right column. If they don't make it that far, you will not get credit for it. And this is not good news because what happens is they will be under open and they will just continue to roll to the next sprint. And this is really, really bad behavior. So you want to make sure that you and your team get everything as much as humanly possible to that farthest most right column so that you can actually get credit when you complete your sprint. Now, for anything that didn't get all the way to the right, you have 2 options. You can move it to the next sprint, or you can just send it to the top of the backlog so that you and your team can reevaluate life again. Most common practice, though, is to just roll it to the next sprint, because if it was a priority last sprint, it's most likely going to be a priority next sprint. So you can just do that, and that'll actually move it to the next sprint. As you can see here, we're already on sprint 3. I just fast forwarded 2 weeks. Welcome to the future. And my board's going to be empty again because I haven't started a new sprint. And now I have my reports. So now I can look at reports here, and I can take a look at my burn down chart, and I can see how I did, right? So I can see that I started with 26 points. I finished a 5-pointer, and I finished a 13-pointer, and I ended my sprint with 8 points left. And so these burn downs are reports that are auto-generated for you. There's nothing special you need to do other than use the story points. And yeah, there's different types of Agile-based reports here on the left. I highly recommend, I got videos on all of these, so if you want to go into detail into what each of these reports do, I got a video for all of these on my main channel, and we'll check that QR code in a few minutes. But these reports are all auto-generated for you. Now, one last thing that I want to talk about, a couple last things that I want to talk about is, as I mentioned, right, the boards show you the forward-looking work, but what happens to all the stuff you finished? Well, if you click on issues here, and you click on all issues, you will see everything. So everything that's in this particular project, you will see them regardless of status. So some of them, if you scroll, you'll see which ones are done. As you can see here, my resolution is not being set. This is a bad thing. This means something's wrong with my workflow. And this is very common. I leave it here because this is a common mistake. When you have a Jira admin that isn't at my skill, not to toot my own horn, right? But this is traditionally a rookie mistake here. And what happens is when you move something to done or to a status of done, it's not just changing the status. The resolution needs to be updated as well. This is really, really bad, folks. If your stories are not being resolved when you move to done, that means that the work is never really finished. And Jira and your reports are going to show it as open work. And so you really do want to make sure that your workflows, talk to your Jira admins. If you see unresolved under your resolution, this is a really, really bad thing if you are done. These should be resolved. They need to update their workflows to properly give you credit. It has negative effects throughout Jira. It's a ripple effect if these are like this where it's unresolved. So make sure you have a good conversation with your admin there. Okay, so that's all the issues. And again, we're basically back in filters, right? So your filters are over here on the left, and you can see all the different filters. So that's the project. Components and releases. This is a slightly more advanced thing, but I'll mention it briefly. I'll mention components, code, and releases. Then we'll switch back over to the PowerPoint, close things up, and check questions. But components are a subsystem of the architecture of what you're trying to build. And all that means is you have a field, it's called components, that the project administrator can create the component name. So if I create a component called component 1 and hit save, when I go to create an issue and I go to the component field, I can now pick that value. And what's cool about this is that a project admin, which can be literally anybody like a lead or a scrum master or a project manager, they can be project admins. They can create these values for you, and you do not need to go talk to your Jira admin to get these values added. Versus a custom field, right? I can create custom fields. I don't know if I have any in here. Here we maybe, yeah, these super awesome fields. If I want to add a value to the super awesome field, I have to call up my Jira admin and go, hey, can you add a couple of values into this field, right? So that adds steps and delays to your process. But the component is that one field that you get for free that technically you should use it as an architecture, right, to describe the parts of your system. But if you're not developing anything, if you're not a software development team, then this component field can be whatever you want. You can't rename it, but the values can be whatever you want. And similarly, we have releases. So releases are milestones, they're phases, right? So I can say MVP, I can give it some dates. We'll do it a month-long release. And when I hit save, now I have some dates, but now again, the same thing, when I hit the create button, there's that fixed version field, and now it's something I can pick from there. So think of these releases or fixed version, because fixed version and release equal the exact same thing. So think of those as just, lines in the sand that you're drawing out for you and your team, and you can pick them, you can put them in there. So really, really cool stuff there with the releases. Again, a little bit more advanced than our typical Jira 101, but definitely if you're a Scrum Master, right, definitely come talk to me. Send me we'll get to it in a second here, but we'll talk about how you can connect with me. But you definitely want releases. If you're a Scrum Master or a product manager on the team or a product owner, releases are your friend, components are your friends, and these filters are your friends. So that's kind of that there. Project pages over here. Oops, sorry, I skipped code. Let me go back to code real quick. If you are a software team, you can connect to your Bitbuckets, to your GitHubs, GitLabs, a couple of other providers, and you can sync. And so essentially in your Jira ticket, you will see the branch, the commits, and the pull request, and most importantly, the status of that pull request. And so you'll see them in there. And now you can take actions, and there's automation rules, which are not even covered in this course, but there's automated things that you can do in Jira that are very, very powerful. And so make sure you connect. If you're a software team and you don't have your code repository connected with Jira, big mistake. Again, release team, Bob's here in the chat. Reach out to release team, sales at releaseteam.com. Again, not sponsored by release team in any way, shape, or form, but if you need help, right, someone like release team should be able to help you out and get you guys going in the right direction. So that's the code, right? Make sure you set up your code and pipelines and everything else from a DevOps perspective. Again, release team, your best bet there. Project pages, so these are Confluence. So if you are using Confluence, you have the ability to connect to Confluence. And this is cool because you can connect to Confluence. I'm going to do this here, hit connect. And now in here, I can see, without leaving Jira, I can see my Confluence pages. So I can see data that is in Confluence within the Jira UI. I can create pages, I can edit pages, I can do everything that I could in Confluence, but context aware, and I'm inside of Jira. So cool little function there. And you can add shortcuts to any website, any link that you want in the world. And then the last thing is project settings. Now, this is definitely a more advanced thing, but I'm just going to mention and close it out here. Project settings are for your project level administrators. There's different levels of administration in Jira. This is the lowest level. This is the one where you will get into trouble the least. And these really should be like your scrum masters, your directors, your project managers, your product owners. They're the people that should have admin rights to the project, so that they can do things like change the name and pick a different category and change the lead and whatnot. So again, if you don't see project settings, that's okay. That just means here on the left side, if you don't see it, that just means that you're not a project admin and you haven't been trusted with those keys to that kingdom. But anyways, we're going to end it right there. I have a hard stop in a couple of minutes, and I wanted to leave time for some questions. So Bob, any specific questions that we have here that I should address?
So this one is going to be a really complex one from Pradarshi. Can you provide tips for effective collaboration and communication within Jira?
Yeah, so let me switch to this one. This is what I'll do for you guys. Tips to take your skills to the next level, right? Because to do effective communication and collaboration with Jira, you really need like a Scrum Master type of training. And so there's a QR code here. Check that out because one, you can follow me on LinkedIn. We can, because I do got to go here in a couple minutes, but we can, direct message me and we can talk about things later. But I do have videos on APEC where we do address those kind of things. So I would go and check there first, completely free resources. But one thing that I kind of want to point out is me personally, I am publishing a series of courses and a Scrum Master for Beginners course. It's going to be like a 12-hour course that I'm working on publishing on Udemy. It's coming. I've been recording it for forever, but it's coming. I just need to get a couple of updates and actual time in their studio to record. But check them out and check out my Udemy profile because it'll be on there a lot more affordable, but we'll go into detail there. And I can't answer it in 5 minutes because this is literally like a 12-hour discussion. But check out that QR code there so you can go check out my courses that I have available, and that will be available for you. Let's see what else we got going on here. Sorry, not to turn that into a marketing spiel, but yeah, it's a complex thing, Pradashi. Who usually puts epics into Jira? The PO or the Scrum Master? So by the book, it's supposed to be the PO, right? It's supposed to be the person that owns that requirement there. And so you definitely want to be engaging with your PO. But in the real world, in my experience, right, I've been doing this for 10 years now, 11 years now. And it's supposed to, you want the person closest to the requirement to be the person creating these items in Jira because they understand the ask the best. But at the end of the day, your company may not have the resources or funding or just maturity to support these positions or these roles. And so If it's you, it's got to be you, right? But I'll just leave it at that, right? There is an order. There's a proper order. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, usually the question is it the PO or is it the Scrum Master? And as because I've been a consultant for so long, I throw the it depends flag. But you are right. Textbook wise, it is the PO. They are the masters of the content. They are masters of the ask, as you put it. But yeah,
Don't be
it
surprised if
depends.
it comes down to the Scrum Master too. I've seen it. I've seen it where the PO just doesn't want to, because they usually live like in AHA, right? Like they're usually like in a different requirements management type of tool, like your AHA or product discovery or something. And I've seen it where me as a Scrum Master, I get the direction from the PO, but I'm typing it in. Right? I'm like the quote unquote secretary for that PO. But if you're a Scrum Master, I would put the onus back on your PO. All right. How can we integrate Jira with other tools and applications? So yeah, Pradarshi, this is a complex one too because there's 6,000 applications in the Atlassian marketplace. And so again, I highly recommend you engage with a team, kind of like release team or other partners that are out there that will help guide you and coach you, right? Because it really just depends on what your use case is and what business problem you're trying to solve to help you figure out what's the right tool for at the right time, right? And so there's so many different vendors in the marketplace app for Jira that it's possible. I can guarantee you that much. And I like to tell people there's usually an app for that. The Atlassian marketplace is a pretty mature place, and there's usually at a minimum one app. And if you're lucky, there's 2, 3 apps that you can try out. But definitely tools. Can you create issue types in Jira Software? Yes, you can create new issue types. Come back for my Jira admin course because that is a Jira administrative thing. As a user of Jira, you don't worry about creating issue types. Let me stop sharing my screen here because I'm probably most likely done. So yeah, so as a user, you do not create them. Can you create webhooks? So webhooks is definitely an advanced Jira admin thing. So we don't cover that, but stay tuned. I do believe I have a video on webhooks, but you have to go check my channel. I have so many videos at this point. All right. So we are basically out of time. I'm just gonna leave it then. I'm gonna leave let me share my screen and just kind of end it here with scan the QR code. And if you've made it this far, folks, and you enjoyed the training, make sure you join us for the Jira Live. We're actually going live today at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And we're gonna be talking. We have a guest almost every single week, and we just talk about the things we love. Atlassian, the good, the bad, the ugly. We talk Jira. So again, if you're looking for a cool place, we usually have about 10, 15 people show up. And so if you want to just join a community with people that are just like you, that are interested in things like you, we usually do have a room full of Jira experts. And so if you want to ask free questions, it's also not a bad way to get us going on how do we do this, how do you do that in Jira. Like this is literally, you got community leaders from all around the world tuning into the Jira Life. And so the best place to get questions answered. So you're in this right now. So just smash that subscribe button right now in YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Help us again. We're trying to get to 1,000 and we're so close, 150 away. And so, yeah, if you're just, I'm going to end it here, but just help us out. Help us. We make all this stuff for you, the community. So smash the subscribe button, help us get to our goals. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you all.